All right, so over the past couple months, we've taken a look at several different graphics cards from the last series, the RTX 2070 and the RTX 3000 series, like the 3060 and 3060 Ti. Today, it's AMD's turn. This is ASRock's Challenger series. It's the RX 6600 XT, and we're going to see how it stacks up against those cards that are right about in its range. I would say that mid-range that aimed at 1080p gaming. So let's take a look. All right, so as you can tell, it's an ASRock, it's a Challenger series. It's a nice card. It looks, I don't know, it looks a tiny bit awkward. It looks like it may be a little bit too thin or just not built out quite all the way, but it does have a smaller PCB, and that's part of it, I'm sure. Much like the 3060 Ti that's built on the smaller PCB, this actually has a full length dual fans, and it is your typical 8 gig of DDR6. It's running, I believe the base clock is 2000. It will be a game clock of like 2300 and a boost clock of 2500 or something like that. Runs at 16 gigaflops per second. Is a pretty decent card. It's aimed at that 1080p gaming type performance. So we're going to test it against the things that are right about in the same price range. Now, MSRP, which we can't really compare it to. This fits in between the 3060 and the 3060 Ti. So I've included it on the charts between those two. The 2070 will be in green, it's at the top. The next one will be the 3060, it's a gigabyte card. This will be in red. This is the AMD card, so it's going to be in red. And then the EVGA card will be in blue at the bottom. That's the 3060 Ti, which is now in Danny D. The other three cards I had out to compare, Danny D, I recently compared. I did it all in the same testing system. It's that system that has the the X570 Asus Prime Pro X570. It's got a 3700X Ryzen 7 3700X by AMD. We've got 32 gig of DDR4 memory running at 3600. I've got two different NVMe drives. One of them is an Intel 665p, and the other one is a WD, the WD Black NVMe, 2 terabyte. I think I got all that right. Anyway, I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen so you can see it if it's not already up there. We're comparing these three cards plus the one that's in Danny D right now. We did show some pictures of it before. Maybe I'll put that up on the screen to compare what Danny D looks like to some of the other cards. Don't have a comparison in size to this one because Danny D is still in that one. This one I did not buy at retail. This actually came out of my sister's build. There is a video on that. The CyberPower PC that she has. She was kind enough to let me borrow this out of there so I could do a video and compare and test it. And we're going to see how it stacks up. Now, it's aimed at that 1080p gaming, anywhere from 60 frames per second all the way up to about 240. Some games will get pretty decent at 1080. I did not get any that reached 240, but that's okay because a lot of games cap out at 240. But the monitor I'm using is a 144 anyway, so it works just fine. I was able to go ahead and get some frame rates that were above that, but that's okay because I can account for that. Testing is testing. I tested them all the same. I went ahead and after each set of cards, I went ahead and did a DDU, that's the driver device uninstall. I went ahead and took all the other drivers off, installed brand new drivers. All video cards are tested at the latest drivers, except for the 3060 Ti, which was tested on the driver that came out in November, not December 1st. But other than that, I mean, it's a driver that was 2 weeks old, so I'm sorry. But by comparison, you're not going to be able to tell that that's an older driver because it did just fine. I did also compare that card to the cards as they were in my editing rig at the time. So there's a video on that if you want to go back and take a look. But in the meantime, we're taking a look at this one. So we're going to kind of see how it goes. Now, the first thing we did is we went ahead and I broke these up. Like I said, I broke them up into the 2070 is green, the 3060 is orange, the red one will be the 6600 XT, and then the 3060 Ti will be in blue. I broke these up into 1080p and 1440. We're going to start with 1440 first, and we're going to show you that, and then we'll go ahead and we'll show you the 1080p. We're going from higher resolution to lower resolution. I just thought it'd be easier to read if I broke these up a little bit. So with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is where we pretty much always start when we're doing our testing, it hung in pretty well, and it especially did well at 1080p gaming, which is where it's targeted. So you figured it would do well, and it does, and it hangs in there very, very well, and no complaints here. It's about what I thought it would be, and works out pretty well here. So there's no complaints one way or the other. With Borderlands, it's a little bit different story. Borderlands is supposed to be an AMD title, and you can tell from these graphs that it's matured a little bit, or the newer AMD graphics cards don't seem to be as tuned as the NVIDIA graphics cards are for this title, and it just proves that NVIDIA has a little bit more time to try to mature that process, and even though it's built with AMD in mind, it still does very, very well in the NVIDIA. Not quite as well in the AMD as I would have thought, hoped, or maybe relied on. Pretty much the same thing for Far Cry 5. You're going to see very similar reaction to that. And then with CSGO, the same thing. I put CSGO 1080p and 1440 on the same slides. So because I only tested it in high, there's no other, I mean, why else would you test it anywhere else? It's supposed to run it really, really well. I mean, this is supposed to be a 1080 card, but it did what it did. It still held in there pretty well. I can't complain. Over 300 frames per second, you're not going to be able to tell that much of a difference between some of these cards, but it wasn't quite the result I really expected. With Forza Horizon 4, does very, very well with this. I was really thinking, okay, maybe this is where it turns the corner, where games that are released, newer games or games that have been released more recently, that maybe that difference will make itself up, or it really will be that 1080p title that we're talking about. But then I kind of get dragged back down and put back in my place. The RTX 3060 Ti here just takes everybody's lunch money. And I don't know what the deal was, but those benchmarks were consistent with the benchmarks that I took with Danny D also, which has a 3600, I'm sorry, it has a 5600G in it with that 3060 Ti, and it got similar frame rates that it does with a 3700X. So that 3060 Ti really, really does like World War Z. And yeah, the other cards just, even though they kept up with each other, they couldn't keep up with that. And then everybody shows up at the party with Horizon Zero Dawn. Everything is copacetic, everything looks good. But for some reason, the RTX 3060 decided it wanted to try to eke out a small victory here. And even though things are pretty much within margin of error, that 3060, just slightly ahead, not too bad at all. And, each one of these cards had their day in the sun type of thing. The 2070, you can't really say the sun setting on that because it's still a solid card and I still use it. It's a great card. But the other cards, they're kind of, each one of these games, they play a little bit better into than some of the other cards, even though they're in the same group of video cards, which was pretty interesting for me to see. Some of the things that did get me though, the NVIDIA cards had a lot more of textures that kind of popped in. I didn't catch it on camera. I should have tried to view it or should have tried to record it when it was going on, but it's that thing where you take something that's a little bit further out and you move a little bit closer in, and some of those textures right there at that break point, some of those textures kind of pop in or change. It's most notable on something like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and that very last graphics test where you're coming down out of the mountain into the village and you see that white building that's in front. When you get to that certain port where you're approaching that building and the textures pop, it did it every single time on that. I only had that happen to me once on the AMD, and that was in Horizon Zero Dawn at 1440 with the ultimate quality. It did it one time in one test. I didn't have any other issues with it. What I did have an issue with, and I finally settled it by changing the variable rate, it tried to stick VSync in on me for some reason or another one of the tests, but I did have a little bit of a white balance issue, and that kind of looks like this. I'll show that on the screen. But that happened a couple of times, and I went back and I looked at my settings, and sure enough, somehow VSync had tried to come on with an AMD card, and after I took that off, I couldn't repeat the effort. I couldn't get it to do it again. So maybe that was the problem, maybe not, but I only saw it a few times, and once I changed that setting, I never saw it again. Still, on almost all the tests, though, did see that the textures popping in on the NVIDIA cards. The AMD card was very, very clean, crisp. The colors were excellent. It surprised me how good it looked, even if it ran a few frames slower. So what do I think overall of this card? The RX 6600 XT, it's focused at 1080p gaming. It does that. It's very capable at 1080p, very capable gaming at that. And if you have, say, a 144 hertz monitor, you're going to be just fine sitting between that sweet spot of, say, 100 to 144 hertz in most cases. Now, if you're playing at ultra settings or badass settings on Borderlands 3 or something like that, then you might get a little bit less than that. But still, it's very playable, looks very good, very smooth. I didn't notice any jumpiness or anything like that, and I kind of expected to in some cases, especially because this card has 8 gig of memory as opposed to the 3060s having 12. And I thought that might make a little bit of a difference. It didn't. I didn't even come close to needing it. It used much more of the system memory than it did the VRAM on the video cards, and what there was plenty. I didn't have any kind of issues at all. Where I think AMD kind of missed the boat on this is they priced this in between the 3060 and 3060 Ti. Now, if they were serious about trying to get to the 1080p gamer, I would have thought they would price this right along with the 3060. Now, you can't really get it for that price right now anyway, but in some cases you can get this card more readily than you can the RTX 3060 or 3060 Ti, even though in some cases those are as good or better cards. And there is some things that NVIDIA has that AMD doesn't. But if you can get that and it's available and it's a reasonable price that's near MSRP, I would say go ahead and pick it up. It does not have the NVENC encoder on it. It does not have a mature RTX. FSR is not available in all games, whereas DLSS is getting more widely used. So I think that's going to be a little bit more mature before the Fidelity FX for AMD does. But I think because that is an open source for with AMD, you're going to see that probably eventually be more widely used. And I think you will see more games use it more and more often, which might give that advantage back to AMD, or by the time they come out with the next series of video cards, their ray tracing will be a little bit more mature and you'll be able to take better advantage of it. I didn't test ray tracing or anything like that in any of these games. The only one that I tested where I could have actually used that or test with was Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I could not do it on the AMD card because the selection for RTX and DLSS are in one setting. And AMD, it's shaded out with AMD. It won't let me do it. So I wasn't able to do that at all. But I will later test games like Cyberpunk or say Control or something that does have some of those settings to see what they look like. But right now I was just interested in apples to apples. What is the frame rate at 1080p, the frame rate at 1440p? How do they compare? What do I think of them? And would I end up buying one of these cards if it came across? In this case, I do have the card because I got it out of a build that my sister bought, and she was kind enough to let me borrow it. But if I found it in the wild, knowing what I know now, and maybe if you know what I know now, you might not be so scared to go ahead and buy it if you see it, especially if you see it for a decent price. I think it is in many ways every bit as good as the RTX 3060, and sometimes it'll nip on the heels of that 3060 Ti. But I really, that 3060 Ti, I mean, right now, that's my favorite card. I really, really do like the performance of that. The price, having to wait for it did kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but after all, we got through it and we did it, so I was pretty happy with it, and I can't complain. This card, I can't complain about at all either. It's very solid. I like it, and I don't think you can go wrong. This one happens to be made by ASRock. Any of the ones you pick up are going to be very similar. Any kind of review you look at or any kind of comparison, you're seeing that most people are just using one or two cards now when they do testing, because the testing across brands is so similar to the base testing. And the 6600 XT is only made by board partners. It's not made by, there is no AMD reference model of that card. So that's all I got for right now. Just kind of letting you guys know what I think and what I feel. A very solid card, very solid performance, especially at 1080p. Does not quite rival the other cards sometimes. Does very well against them in others, and in a few titles it does extremely well. So it can't really complain too much about that, and I'm not going to. So what's next for me? We're done testing this, and it took a lot longer than I thought, but maybe this next thing won't take quite as long as that. we're going to take a look at this. This is my sister's old computer. This is an HP 24-inch all-in-one, and even though it had some issues and it's older, it's maybe 2015, I think, was when it was originally made, with a Core 2 Duo. I think two cores, 4 threads, I think is what has in it. But we'll take a look. And if we can't fix the computer, or we can't do anything with the computer, it's the hard drive that's the issue. But it is a very slow computer. We've given her a huge upgrade right now. But might not be interested in using it as a computer as much as I might be interested in using it as an extra monitor. So we're going to see if we can't do that instead. Anyway, that's all I got for right now. If you enjoyed the video or got something out of it, do me a favor, please hit that thumbs up. If you didn't, go ahead, you can put thumbs down, but kind of let me know why and what's going on. Comments are always welcome, and I appreciate them. I read every one, and I try to reply as many as I can. And don't forget to subscribe. I really would like to hit 500 by the end of the year. It's coming close. I don't know if I'm going to get there. I can with you guys' help, but that's all I can do. And until next time, when we take a look at that, that's probably going to be the next video. That's all I got for right now, so I'll see you later.